It's been a while since I've done a video, and I need to give a little bit of an update because I have achieved a few things in the time that I wasn't videoing, and but mainly I was stuck doing other stuff around the house and work and other things. So this kind of sat back burner. So last time I think on my video I think I had front aprons were getting welded in, and then just I think between that and the upper or the shock towers. So that's fine. That's pretty much where it was. But I had to install the rear aprons. One of the problems I was having when I was trying to put them in there was that I wasn't able to easily maintain the 40-inch dimension from hinge mount face to hinge mount face, the internal dimension across. It kept wanting, this side especially, kept wanting to kind of shift in. Just didn't fit smoothly, and it kind of like forced a little bit of a twist on the panel. So I wasn't real happy with that, because I figured if I went to weld the other side in, even to spot it in, I didn't know that I would be able to maintain that edge or that distance without something really holding it positively there. So what I did was I had some tubing, and I basically had these pieces made, cut out with the hole patterns in them, and they're identical, so at least I can get them square. And I basically took those and welded them to the piece. I had these, I cut these to 40 inches, and then that way I had my dimension, and just squared them up on the ends and welded them on, and then just kind of tacked them all in place. And then I slid that inside the gap, and that allowed me to make sure it was pushing, basically equally on each side of the aprons. So each side of the car. And so I got done putting it in, and once I had it, had it bolted, I ran a couple of the bolts from the hinge mounts into the through it, I guess, to hold that in place. And when I got done bolting it in, then I took some measurements, and from the outside of that plate to the center line of the car, and the outside of that plate to the center of the car was 20 inches on each side. So it must have, apparently it's self-centered at that point. So that was good. So, and then it held it in place. I didn't have to screw around with it. I could just, I could push on little spots to hold it down to tack it, but I didn't have to worry about the whole panel moving every time I did something. So I did, that did work out a lot better than I thought it, would. I was hoping it would work, and it seemed to work pretty well. The only thing I will say though is that I cut the plate, I had the plates, they're identical design, and I figured at the time that when I put those on there, they'd both be equal. Now, it's crooked over there, you can see on the top of it. That's basically, that was just me doing some of my, ruler measurements on a apron that wasn't held in place, and so on and so forth. But what I noticed was that like this guy is not exactly the same angle as that guy in relation, or they weren't quite in relation with the apron. And what it was, I started taking some measurements on the aprons. Those holes are not the inserts for the hood mount locations. They're not identical. Like the distance from that to the top from all three holes is not identical to the other side. So what it honestly means is that when they stamped those holes, they ended up in the same place in relationship to the top edge. So either they're not perfectly in line with each other, or the tops weren't bent correctly. So really you kind of have to force it all into place to get it to work. But now at least I know that I've got the holes across from each other. Now all that being said, there are slots on the hinges. So you have a lot of play, and where they put the holes at the factory, so to speak, for where I say factory as in the aftermarket apron manufacturer, where they put those holes, as long as they're within reason, they'll line up in the slots. So it's not the end of the world, but it's still kind of frustrating. You get done putting something on there and it doesn't line up, and you're like, what the heck, man? So yeah, that was kind of interesting. But anyway, I got that in place, and then was able to do all the welding down, obviously on the inside through to the shock tower, and then all the the part where it held up against the firewall. And that's how I knew that it actually worked pretty well. Once I aligned it, I was pretty much flush with both sides on the firewall. So I was like, okay, so it actually lines up at that point. I had one spot on the other side where you get a little bit of slack in one corner, I believe here. So I had a little bit of slack where it kind of bowed out here, where it didn't completely conform to this contour, and I just slit the panel and then hammered it down a little bit to get that. And then I'll basically either I'll hammer and do this one again, or I'll just seam seal it. I haven't quite decided yet. But I mean, it's not a huge gap, but it's just it's something that kind of bugs me, but there's nothing I can do about it because I can't change the height of this. I can try to knock it down, but of course you knock it down one area and it flexes up in another. So I'd probably have to just cut it, knock it down, and re-weld it again. And that'll get me a lot tighter. So I can have at least tight joints where I'm gonna have the seam sealer. So anyway, and then, so otherwise, I've got obviously the extensions in. I did have some panels made, some little alignment strips, if you will. So I had dimensions from my original shock towers, or sorry, original aprons, and so I was able to can't really lay that up there where it's supposed to be now, but I made some strips that are at least in line, and I checked these versus the fender to make sure that, hey, all these holes are correct. And then I was able to take these and just lay them up on here as I was working on like the rear aprons to make sure I didn't have any locational issues here, or I wasn't too far forward back. And then same thing, when I went to put the extension on, I was able to confirm that I was lined up before I actually start tacking it in place. Obviously all this flushed up nice, so I can't complain there. But once I flushed this up, then these really all just fell in line too. So I just wanted to get confirmation because from this aftermarket manufacturer, I have no idea where they stamp these holes, if they're right or not. So I just wanted to make sure that, hey, they're all in line. I won't get done and have to route a bunch of holes out. So anyway, it was helpful, just a visual cue, if not, or a visual aid, if nothing else. And it didn't cost, but I think 20-something bucks. So not a bad deal. Anyway, and then eventually I'm going to take the my cross brace out, and I'm going to do some export brace manufacturing too, probably at some point in time, just to get to have something a little different there. So anyway, that's a problem for another day. But anyway, down on the bottom of the car, I did not install the lower arm, or the lower control arm mounts yet. So the bracket that goes in there has your engine mount and everything. I haven't put that in yet on either side, and I also haven't put the corner braces in. And some of that's just because I don't know that I'm going to use the same setup. I mean, I'm going to use probably the diagonals, and I'm going to use all that, but I'm thinking about doing some modification to try to make correct some little things that I think aren't really ideal. Not that I know better than Ford or anything, but the aftermarket parts, that you put when you have like those the strut arm ones that have like the heim joint and everything. When you install those, they're no longer, the heim joint, the rotation of the heim joint is no longer center lined on that bracket where it's supposed to be, because that bracket is actually in line with your A-arm or your arm mount axes. So it's meant to have the strut arm and that arm, rotate from the same point on each side, so that it actually swings properly. And when you put those aftermarket ones, it moves it out. I'm not saying it's the end of the world, it's going to hurt anything, but it's still not technically correct. So I'm contemplating taking that piece and moving it back a little bit. Not the whole arm, but just the center where there's extra beef up parts are in the middle. So anyway, there's more to follow on that probably at some point in time when I get to it. But for now, I'm looking at doing the torque boxes. So I've got, obviously I've got the convertible rockers in here, and that's not going to, obviously this isn't going to fit past that, because this is an original, just typical coupe torque box. And that's the thing, lesson learned. Don't buy all your parts early before you really know what you're going to do, or you're going to end up doing a lot of modification. So, but otherwise I would have just bought convertible inner torque or torque boxes, but lesson learned. So this piece here, what I'm going to do is basically just slit. I'm going to cut, this corner out in order to allow it to slip up over here and clear the inner rocker on here. So that's my plan, and I know there's some other modifications that have to happen as well, like this strip down the inside, or the edge of that along the inside. When it comes down, it strikes your floor support flange. So I know that has to be trimmed a little bit as well. Or I think it might strike there, and I think the other thing is it has to clear this flange under here as well. So there has to be a little bit of trimming there, but I'll get to that. That's not a big deal. It's just going to be some light trimming. But the bigger thing is calculating where this guy belongs over here, because it's not square. So it's not like it goes in like this. It goes at an angle. So when you do that angle on that torque box, or sorry, when you flip the torque box panel at an angle, this dimension here grows. So because now it's the hypotenuse of the triangle, it's a lot longer. So it's gonna I have to rotate that. So anyway, that's where I'm at with it now. And what I'm going to do is start measuring that out and start chopping that thing out so I can try to put that panel in there. They're pretty heavy duty. I mean, they're not. I mean, I think they're probably 90,000 stick or 80,000 stick. So it's good, decent material. It feels pretty heavy, so I think it should be pretty strong once you get everything welded in. But anyway, that's where I'm at with it, and I'll start chopping away and hopefully, get that piece at least dry fitted and get everything ready to get welded in. All right, so I started back up again on the torque boxes on the car. I didn't bother videoing it because there's a bunch of videos on how to do torque boxes on these Mustangs online, so it doesn't really help to add another one. The only difference is I did have to add the cutout in the upper panel, or sorry, the upper portion of the triangle, just on that panel, just because I have the inner convertible rockers in there. That's what these spot welds or fillets or whatever you call them, rosettes are. So you have to notch out that upper panel for it to slide in. You don't really have to do anything to the lower piece except take off the flange that goes underneath the rail. So under here, there's normally this piece here has a flange that comes down, and that flange can't get where it needs to go because you have an inner rocker in there if you do this, and the inner rocker, it's taking up space, the side to side, so it just won't fit. It's wanting to push the whole thing over, and that's not going to work. So you have to trim that piece off, do a little bit of sanding there, and then just weld it back, weld it in up to the piece below it, or above it, sorry. So anyway, that's kind of how that goes. Obviously, you weld the back edge, and you weld along the lower floor support. Nothing really rocket sciencey. like I said, just lots of videos on that. And then of course there's a lot of grinding needed in the end there, because the top panel goes in, it gets welded to the firewall, and then this panel doesn't quite get to the end of that one, so it gets its own bead. So of course I'll sand that down, smooth it out a little bit, and then that'll probably get seam sealed in the long run anyway. And then obviously you're doing that vertical pass there too, tying it to the frame rail, and then eventually I'll have to get that triangular piece that goes in here. I'll have to install that as well. I haven't done that yet, obviously. So that's where that is. The other thing I'm going to do on here, and this is mainly because I had a video, quite a while ago, where I had to basically separate a frame rail, like the inner from the outer skin, and try to realign it because on the passenger side, because it wasn't the right width, and it was causing a gap when I put the floor support on it. So anyway, when I was taking it apart, I realized that a lot of the spot welds that tie these two pieces together aren't terribly strong. So what I'm going to do is come in and strip some of these areas and stitch bead it on the frame. Do that on both sides, just to, the top and the bottom, just to make sure that the welds that are in there are actually good quality welds. Like you can see here, you see where they hit it with the spot welder. That's the things I'm talking about. Some of them aren't as deep as these, so they didn't really get a good burn on it, and they're just not as strong. And I just don't want any kind of possibility of flex or play in there, or God forbid, cracking. So I'm going to try to stitch that up to make it a little more stout. So anyway, that's kind of where that stands. The other thing I'm going to be working on today is I've got the engine mount / lower control arm or lower arm mounts that I'm going to be trying to size and prep for install. I've got to do a little bit of sanding of some spot welds to make them all fit. But what I've noticed, these are Dynacorn. They came with the shock towers. So I was hoping for better quality, but it is what it is. But what it looks like is that these are not bent at 90 degrees. They're shallow from that. They're 85 and a half or something degrees. So as a result, it wouldn't fit all the way on. This one I did work. I reworked it a little bit to get it to actually fit on there. This guy is not even remotely going on. And when you do push it on there, because it's so narrow, that angle, it wants to kick it out, which then wants to hold it low. So my bolts won't line up. Now these are just ways of me kind of hanging it here while I'm talking. But even when I take this out and shove it up against there, these bolt holes here are almost a half an inch, or not half inch, sorry, about a 1/4 inch low of where they should be to line up.
because it's striking on the bottom of the rail, so it just can't physically go up that far. So I'm gonna need to take that bottom flange and actually tweak those down somehow. I haven't quite figured that out on this one yet, because this was worse than the driver's side. But I'm gonna have to see if I can get that figured out to make that thing fit up there flush, so that when you go to weld it, you're not welding with gaps in there and everything else. And the fact that you know, it has to be in the right place, because that's your, this is your lower arm mount. Otherwise, this lower arm mount would be lower than the one on the driver's side, which would be really, really bad. So, and then the other thing you got to watch is your dimension in between the two. So if once they seat all the way, then from mounting hole to mounting hole, there's a set distance, and I can't remember offhand what it was, like 19.5 or something. But that's going to have to be, make sure that's, validate that before I end up welding it in, or verify it. So, but anyway, that's where I'm at for now. I'm gonna start working on this and see if I can get this left, or this passenger side mount corrected to where it actually fits on the car.